Superpower. The very word conjures up images of unmatched might. It's the ultimate status for a nation, signaling its dominance on the global stage. But it's not easy to become one. In fact, the number of nations to have achieved the status of superpower can be counted on one hand, with a finger or two to spare. But now, some experts are predicting that another nation could be set to join the rarefied ranks of military superpowers, and it's one that no one would have predicted even half a decade ago. Ukraine. So, let's take a look at what defines a military superpower and examine the signs that Ukraine is on the way to becoming one. To start with, let's define exactly what a military superpower is, which turns out to be easier said than done. Scholars often disagree on the criteria that define a superpower and what distinguishes it from other powers. There are various definitions, but perhaps Britannica sums them all up most succinctly. A superpower is a state that cannot be ignored on the world stage, and without whose cooperation no world problem can be solved. The possession of highly superior military capabilities is generally considered to be the most important element in distinguishing a superpower, such as the US, from a major power, such as France or the United Kingdom. But it's not the only criterion. A superpower is characterized by its ability to project influence and power globally across multiple dimensions, of which military supremacy is just one. Economic power, including a large advanced economy with a large GDP, global trade influence, and a dominant currency, is in many senses just as important. Without this economic power, a nation has serious constraints on funding military, diplomacy, and soft power initiatives. Political influence is another key factor in being regarded as a superpower. This includes leadership in international institutions such as the UN Security Council, NATO, and the IMF, the ability to shape global agendas, and the capacity to exert overwhelming diplomatic leverage to bear. Military and economic might are, of course, essential to flex this political and diplomatic muscle. Soft power or cultural power is another important determinant of superpower status. Global influence through media, entertainment, education, and cultural exports, think Hollywood and Facebook, goes a long way towards molding values, behaviors, and perceptions worldwide in the superpower's favor. A large skilled population, control over abundant natural resources, technological and scientific leadership in crucial technologies are also considered to be important factors. And some scholars believe that a coherent, globally relevant political philosophy or ideology, like liberal democracy or capitalism, is essential for a superpower to be able to dictate international norms and alliances. Now, under this broad definition of the term superpower, Ukraine is undoubtedly a long way from achieving that status. Frankly, so is almost everyone else. The only nation broadly accepted as a superpower today is the US. Most academics consider the Soviet Union to have been a rival superpower before its collapse, but few currently consider Russia a superpower, and for good reason. It certainly falls far short of most of the economic, soft power, and demographic requirements. Economically, China is certainly a superpower. It's the so-called world factory, the world's largest exporter and second largest importer. And when measuring by purchasing power parity, its GDP is significantly larger than even the US's. However, it still lags behind the US militarily and in most of other criteria, leading most experts to consider it as an emerging superpower, not a fait accompli. However, all three nations are considered superpowers by some measures, along with the UK and France. By 2050, some have predicted that countries such as Brazil, India, and Indonesia will join them, at least from an economic and global influence perspective. But for now, the US remains top of the pile by some distance. But if we're talking strictly about a military superpower as opposed to the broader definition, things look different. And it's here, in the military domain, that Ukraine is staking its superpower claim. Now, this is the kind of astute deep dive we specialize in here at the Military Show. So, subscribe to the channel for your daily dose of the latest and most important military news and insight. A military superpower is distinguished by its ability to project overwhelming and sustained force globally, with dominance across multiple domains. 5 factors typically come into play. First is global power projection, i.e. the capacity to deploy and sustain military forces anywhere in the world, supported by a network of overseas bases, strategic airlift, and naval fleets. The US is way ahead in this regard, maintaining a network of more than 800 overseas bases, a huge fleet of aircraft and tankers to refuel them, and 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. That kind of power enables rapid response and persistent presence around the world. This is arguably the area where Ukraine has the furthest to go in order to become a military superpower. Still, it's making progress, and has to a large extent already overtaken Russia, especially at sea. Ukrainian forces are increasingly active in places like Sudan, Mali, and even in Iran. Most of these activities target Russian forces or the local forces they back. Indeed, according to Kirilo Budanov, Ukraine's military intelligence chief, their mission is to destroy Russian war criminals anywhere in the world, wherever they are. In the bloody, long-running Sudanese civil war between government forces and the rebel Rapid Support Forces (RSF), reports of Ukrainian military involvement are contradictory. On the one hand, Ukrainian special forces have reportedly conducted drone strikes and ground operations against the RSF and mercenaries from the infamous Russian Wagner Group private military company that support them. On the other hand, Sudanese Foreign Ministry official Mohammed al-Sir has claimed that Ukraine provides support to the RSF by supplying them with drones, which are offered at very low prices. Maybe Ukraine is indeed playing both sides, as Russia appears to be. While Wagner mercenaries are almost certainly assisting the RSF, the Kremlin retains close military ties with the Sudanese government. Still, while the likes of the US, Russia, the UK, France, and even Israel command a greater ability to project power than Ukraine on land, at sea, Ukraine is rapidly catching up, and in some senses has already overtaken the rest of the field. In particular, Ukraine is busy revolutionizing maritime warfare with its use of naval drones. Most of the modest navy that Ukraine inherited from the Soviet Union at independence in 1991 was seized or destroyed during Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the initial stages of its invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. However, subsequently, Ukraine has used its ever-evolving naval drone capabilities to transform maritime warfare in the Black Sea, enabling a smaller, under-resourced navy to challenge Russia's larger fleet through asymmetric tactics. And they've been so successful at it that Ukrainian naval drone technology and expertise are now in big demand around the world. The bottom line is that Russia, and likely many other militaries, simply weren't prepared for the new threat to its navy and commercial fleet from Ukrainian naval drones, and the way Ukraine uses them. Naval drones travel towards their targets on the sea surface or just below it. They're very difficult to detect and to hit when they've been detected. That means that when they strike, it often comes as a complete surprise to the target, adding an element of psychological terror to the physical destruction they wreak. Over the course of the war, Ukraine has scored a number of high-profile hits on prized Russian vessels, costing Russia untold amounts in damage and even more in terms of reputation. The most prominent systems include the Magura V5, Magura V6P, and Magura V7, developed by Ukraine's main Directorate of Intelligence, the HUR, and operated by the 385th USV Brigade. Added to that mix is the Sea Baby, developed by Ukraine's Security Service, or SBU. These multi-purpose unmanned surface vessels, or USVs, have a diverse mission profile. They're capable of reconnaissance, surveillance, mine countermeasures, and most tellingly, high-impact kamikaze attacks. The name Magura has dual meanings. It's the name of a Slavic warrior goddess, but it's also become an acronym for Maritime Autonomous Guard Unmanned Robotic Apparatus. The original Magura V5 was introduced in 2023. It's an 18-foot-long USV with a 5-foot beam, 1.3-foot draft, and a 1.1-ton displacement. With a price tag of an estimated $250,000 to $300,000 per unit, it has a range of up to 500 miles and a payload of up to 660 pounds. And that's enough firepower to cause serious damage to a much larger military warship, like a destroyer or corvette, which typically costs millions of dollars or more. The Magura V5 first came to attention in May 2023, when 3 of them attacked and damaged the Ivan Kors, a 4,000-ton Yuri Ivanov class, also known as Project 18280, intelligence collection ship. The ship was sailing hundreds of miles from Ukraine at the time of the attack. Attacks with the drone continued, and in February 2024, the Magura V5 gained global attention when it became the first naval drone to sink an enemy warship. During the attacks, it destroyed the Russian Tarantul 3 class guided missile corvette Ivanovets and the 4,000-ton Rapucha class Cesar Kunikov landing ship. Within the first year of becoming public, Magura V5 USVs operating in one-way attack mode reportedly destroyed 8 Russian warships and damaged 6 more, causing more than $500 million in damage to the Russian fleet. By the end of 2025, it had reportedly damaged or destroyed at least 20 Russian military vessels. And with Ukraine reportedly able to produce at least 50 of them a month, it's unlikely those costs are going to end there. As mentioned earlier, a large part of the Magura's effectiveness is how challenging they are to detect. The drones incorporate a low-profile V-shaped carbon fiber hull with a waterline height of only 1.6 feet and a low thermal signature. They're powered by water jet propulsion and have a cruising speed of roughly 22 knots and a top speed of 42 knots, although burst speeds of up to 54 knots have been claimed. While technical details are mostly classified, the USVs are thought to possess GPS, inertial, and first-person view camera guidance via 2 electro-optic cameras. These are combined with mesh radio with aerial repeater or satellite communications to provide jam-resistant multi-channel communication. In addition to explosive warheads, they can also carry alternative payloads like machine guns, anti-tank guided missiles, or even surface-to-air missiles or SAMs. As if that wasn't enough for the Russian fleet to contend with, in the spring of 2025, Ukraine introduced the larger Magura V7 variant. The V7 is 24 feet long and displaces 1.3 tons light and up to 3.7 tons fully loaded. It features significantly enhanced seakeeping capabilities, AI-enabled targeting, and an extended operational range of around 800 nautical miles. It can operate with a maximum payload of around 1,400 pounds and is frequently pictured carrying 2 SAMs on launch rails. Indeed, in May 2025, the V7 made further naval drone history when it shot down 2 Russian Su-30 strike fighters with AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles. In parallel with the Magura attacks, the SBU's Sea Baby drone has reportedly damaged or destroyed a further 11 Russian warships in the Black Sea. Originally conceived as a single-use kamikaze boat, in October 2025, the SBU demonstrated that the platform had evolved into a reusable, multi-role platform. The range of the upgraded Sea Baby has been expanded from around 600 miles to more than 900 miles, and its payload doubled to a whopping 4,400 pounds. Like the V7, it can also be fitted with remote-controlled weapons systems, including multiple rocket launchers and guns. According to SBU Brigadier General Ivan Lukashevich, the new vessels also feature AI-assisted friend-or-foe targeting systems and can launch small aerial attack drones and multi-layered self-destruct systems to prevent capture. The combination of Magura and Sea Baby USVs has caused serious havoc among the previously vaunted Russian Black Sea fleet. On paper, the mismatch between the size of the fleet and Ukraine's minuscule traditional navy is such that no one predicted just how effective they would be. But the net result is that the Black Sea fleet had to put its soggy tail between its legs and flee from Crimea hundreds of miles east to Novorossiysk. Moreover, Ukraine's naval drones, especially the longer-range Sea Babies, have made it unsafe for Russia's commercial fleet, especially its sanctions-evading so-called shadow fleet. Ukraine has already hit several Russian tankers, damaging them severely enough to take them out of action for extended periods. And these attacks have taken place not just in the Black Sea, but off the coast of Senegal, in far-removed Russian ports, and in the Mediterranean. It's become so bad for Russia that they're probably going to have to start sending warships to escort their commercial fleet, putting them at the risk of Sea Baby attacks and compromising their naval defenses back home in the process. So, Ukraine has in a very real sense transformed naval warfare. Most other nations' warships are at the same kind of risk from this technology as Russia, and Ukraine is the undisputed leader. It should come as little surprise then that a lucrative USV export market is opening up for Ukraine. A landmark agreement with US company Red Cat Holdings has enabled the company to assemble and sell the Magura V7 in the US. Lithuania is also exploring co-production of Magura drones, with half the units intended for Ukraine and half retained for its own defense. These growing export opportunities for Ukraine's latest military technologies are a sign that Ukraine is approaching the second criterion for being considered a military superpower: advanced technology and multi-domain dominance. Typically, in the modern era, that means cyber warfare, space operations, AI-driven systems, and fifth-generation platforms like F-35 fighters. But Ukraine has advanced and refined the use of drones to such an extent that it must already be considered a superpower in unmanned systems. And that expertise isn't just at sea, it's just as prevalent in the air and increasingly on the ground. Russia has certainly narrowed the gap and in some respects, such as the ability to scale production, overtaken Ukraine in terms of aerial drones. But the truth is, for most of the war, it's been playing catch-up or struggling to come up with countermeasures to Ukraine's innovations. From FPV kamikaze drones that have turned the long-established method of armored column-based maneuver warfare into a death trap, to an increasing variety of long-range strike drones pummeling targets deep inside Russia in increasing numbers nightly, Ukraine has become a drone superpower. But it's not just the drones themselves that distinguish Ukraine, it's the ingenious ways it uses them. Look no further than the famous Operation Spiderweb as evidence. In an encounter that will undoubtedly become a chapter in asymmetrical warfare textbooks for generations to come, Ukraine simultaneously attacked 5 airfields as far afield as Siberia, damaging or destroying at least 7 of Russia's strategic long-range bombers, transport planes, and perhaps most crucially, one of its rare AWACS-type long-range reconnaissance planes. What's more, they carried out the attack with small, cheap quadcopter-type kamikaze drones, launched not from Ukraine, but from right near the 5 bases. The drone components were smuggled into Russia and assembled in secret. They were then loaded into specially built trucks with detachable roofs and driven by unsuspecting drivers, it appears, close to the bases. The roofs were then remotely opened and the drones launched at their targets. It was a daring and hugely successful operation, perhaps only trumped by Israel's use of similar tactics in the early part of Israel's 2025 12-day war with Iran. However, it's just the most well-known of hundreds of such strikes, which have cost the Russian war machine tens of billions of dollars and deeply impacted its logistics, military production, oil production, and energy exports. And Ukraine's growing capacity to plan and conduct ever-increasing numbers of these strikes also points to its emergence as a military superpower. Now, the next 2 criteria to be considered a military superpower are admittedly still a long way off for Ukraine. To be considered a military superpower, a nation should have at its disposal a massive budget and industrial capacity. Military superpower status should also be reflected in dominant positions in strategic alliances and influence. Ukraine certainly has carved out a unique, critical, and growing role for itself in European security architecture, and President Zelensky enjoys a superpower-like relationship with the leaders of the most powerful European nations. Ukraine also has a special relationship with NATO. However, it's still largely at the mercy of the alliance's decisions and doesn't have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, typically considered par for the course for a superpower. But in the penultimate criterion, Ukraine is again making rapid progress towards superpower status. That is, a military superpower should possess an abundance of combat-ready manpower and logistics. With regards to logistics, Ukraine is dependent on Western aid for many of its vehicles. Wartime has forced the shuttering of its airports, and Russia continues to pummel its railways, roads, and bridges. While it may be a superpower at restoring damaged logistics, Ukraine simply doesn't have the capacity during wartime to maintain the kind of logistics infrastructure that screams superpower. However, when it comes to manpower, it's a different story. At an estimated 800,000 strong, Ukraine's army is the biggest in Europe. and undoubtedly the most experienced and battle-hardened after 4 years of grinding war. Sure, there are major issues such as an estimated 310,000 desertions and growing public discontent with harsh force mobilization tactics. But the fact is that 4 years into the war, Ukraine is still standing its ground like a superpower. It's not collapsed, as a great many predicted at the start of the war. When the war ends, all that experience among so many soldiers should translate into an armed force that few, if any, opposing forces can match. Now, the final criterion to be considered a military superpower is one that controversially remains out of Ukraine's reach, but perhaps not for long: nuclear deterrence. In particular, modern military superpowers typically possess a nuclear triad: land, air, and sea-based delivery systems, ensuring second strike capability and strategic deterrence. The Soviet Union took the nukes it had stationed in Ukraine when it left the country, and what remained of its enriched uranium was handed over to the US in 2012. So, for now, Ukraine doesn't have a nuclear deterrent at all, let alone a nuclear triad. But that could be temporary. In October 2024, former Deputy Secretary of the Security Council of Ukraine and ex-Deputy Commander of Ukraine's Special Forces, Sergei Krivinos, controversially claimed that Ukraine's lack of a nuclear deterrence was a matter of choice. When Ukraine, through the hands of Yanukovych in 2013, gave the last enriched uranium to the United States, our capabilities were significantly reduced, Krivinos told the New Life channel in an interview. But we can achieve this goal if we do it quietly and without advertising, and there are more than enough people in Ukraine who know how to do this and did it at one time. Indeed, the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service in February 2026 accused the UK and France of preparing to arm Ukraine with nuclear weapons, in spite of being signees of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which precludes such supply. Both the UK and France strongly rejected the allegations, but maybe the smoke indicates there's a fire brewing. Without a nuclear deterrent, it's hard to make the case that Ukraine, or any non-nuclear armed nation for that matter, is a military superpower. But in almost every other regard, they're on track to become the most powerful military in Europe, if not one of the most powerful in the world. And that's exactly what Russia didn't want to see happening. Now, subscribe to the channel if you want to stay informed on the very latest in the war in Ukraine, such as this video. Thanks for watching.